Well, folks, if you haven't already seen it, we had a great interview with Coach Ralph Icernia for RPI as our coach interview for this week. We wanted to pump that out there first to you folks, as it is Shoes Week. We want to get people ready for the oldest college football rivalry in New York State. Say that five times fast. I dare you, James. But nonetheless, go watch that if you haven't already. 20 good minutes with Coach Icernia. He's always a pleasure to have on the show. And he was a little bit taken by surprise, I think, by the whole audio aspect of it. But it's still great nonetheless. He did a great job for us. Let's talk about the games from the weekend. We only covered some of them in our D3 Blitzer show, the ones that really had national implications. So we might not dwell too much on those games that we've already kind of gone over in that show, but nonetheless, we'll go through the rest of the games in those conferences. I think we should probably start with the NJAC. We actually usually end with the NJAC and the MAC. Let's reverse course this week because
flip the
go
script
from clarity to no clarity right away when you look at the NJAC and the MAC coming up here. But Wesley, congratulations to Coach Drass and company, 30-20 win over Salisbury.
Yeah, and it was kind of a tale of two halves when we were watching that game during our D3 Blitzer show on Saturday. Salisbury was really gashing the Wolverines early on until it seems like the second half rolled around. Wesley made some adjustments and got a couple of big plays on offense that helped them pull away. Really, though, kind of give the game ball to the defense, in my opinion, because they held Salisbury scoreless in the second half, and that ultimately was the difference in the game.
Absolutely. Defense across the conference, actually, throughout this past week. TCMJ beats Christopher Newport 21-19. Montclair beats Rowan 13-3. How did that happen? Kane, though, almost nipped Frostburg State, and that could have some interesting implications if they look at that result a little bit carefully. Frostburg State's strength of schedule goes up this week with Kane, but they almost lose to a team that is considerably below them in terms of people's view of them, and 17-14 final.
Yeah, this was if there was one area where we had a ball drop, was not keeping a closer eye on this one because the Cougars almost did pull off the upset. But the thing that stood out to me in the box score, Frank, is that this quarterback TJ Peer, he's not the same guy who Frostburg had been leaning on early on. I believe that was Connor Cox. And so there might have been an injury situation either before or during the game that sort of maybe put the Bobcats on just trying to get back in order here. They trailed 14-3 at halftime, but it was Pierre and his receiver Sergio Andino who caught a couple of touchdown passes in the third quarter that ultimately helped the Bobcats prevail. They're still ranked in the top 25. They are still probably the number one team from a Pool C perspective from our region, having the best chance of getting in. I think projections are still showing that if they can beat Salisbury next week, that they have a pretty good chance of getting one of the very few Pool C or at-large bids. So, hey, congrats to the Bobcats. If it was whether, with a new quarterback, the game of, or the last couple, that was a big win for them because Kane and the Cougars are no cupcake for sure.
Let's go to the MAC where we have the Widener-Del Val situation. We've been waiting for this for like 3 weeks. We've been pointing out this is going to be a major game. This is going to be a major game. Well, guess what? This is going to be a major game. It could have major implications on Pool C because if Widener were to beat Del Val would probably get a bid still. We believe that Del Val is locked in right now. That said, a team like Frostburg better watch this game and make sure that if they beat Salisbury on Saturday, that Widener does not win this game. Otherwise, it could be tough sledding for Frostburg if they were going to be, let's say, the last team in or something along those lines. But Del Val does a great job, 51-7 against Misericordia, and we left that game at around 35-7, if I remember correctly, or something like along those lines.
Yeah, 27.
Yeah, and Widener is 27-6 over Kings. So no surprises heading into this big game coming up. Without giving away predictions, what are you thinking about that game?
I think it's going to be an awesome defensive game because the Aggies defense has been outstanding all season, and they've scored a lot of touchdowns as far as defensive goes. And Widener on Saturday, they had 6 turnovers, I think 5 interceptions, 11 sacks on Kings, and which isn't a bad football team. They can put up a lot of points. They're pretty explosive offense, kind of middle of the pack as far as the MAC goes, but still I think this game is going to be an old-fashioned 1950s style slugfest here, and it'll come down to ultimately which offense can solve these defenses.
Now let's talk about the infirmary game, also known as Brockport versus Alfred. Unfortunately, we kept catching that game when there were major injuries going on. First, Joe Germinario from Brockport. He texted us back. We had actually texted him during the end of our D3 Blitzer show, and he said he's okay. He was tweeting from his hospital bed, that said, and so they obviously were being precautionary about what they were doing with him. I would not be shocked if he misses the St. Lawrence game, just get fully recovered. Haven't seen any confirmation about exactly what it is, but you pointed out, we went back to watch the highlights of that show around the 2-hour and 14-minute mark of our show, and we sent him the link and said, you may not want to watch this because you probably, A, don't remember the hit, but B, don't want to see what happened to you. He got laid out in that play. But Bryce Morrison later on from Alfred also gets laid out. I mean, that was a ridiculous game. Defensively, we saw just how strong those defenses are by what they did to the quarterbacks on each side.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a knockdown, drag-out fight, and it was interesting that it kind of came down to the defenses basically deciding the game. There was like an interception or a scoop and score situation that Brockport had when they were only up 28-25 with about 5 minutes left. And Frank, you're the official. You were doing some play calling down there at MetLife Stadium this past weekend for I believe it was the fire department and the NYPD, sort of a charity football game. But the touchdown was called back for excessive celebration / taunting. On one hand, I think that was bad for Brockport's momentum, but on the flip side, it allowed them to kill some more time off the clock. And give credit to quarterback Jason Helwig. I don't think he threw any passes, but he did successfully lead the team down the shortened field and got a pretty critical touchdown with about 3 minutes left that put this one away.
Yeah, and I'm showing you some clips from this situation, but you'll see as we do run this clip right now that it looks to me like a player came onto the field area, and that's what the flag is coming in for. The referee was passing by and probably had a player nearly trip him or something along those lines, and that's unfortunately wiped the touchdownable thing, or as you call it, a no-no right there. Yeah, but I'm a little surprised that they penalized to that degree instead of some kind of bench warning after the fact or unsportsmanlike after the fact. So, as you said, though, during the broadcast, it probably helped them because they were able to kill off a lot of the clock remaining and still score in that situation because Alfred was beginning to get a real ability to score fast. That was, though, when Morrison was okay. Eventually, he goes down, and that game changes again at that point.
Yeah, a lot of injuries and sore bodies after that one. But the funny thing, Frank, is that was probably even the craziest game the Empire ate this weekend because it really took a blocked punt and a touchdown scoop and score for Cortland to outlast Utica 24-23.
Two blocked
not
kicks
necessarily
in that game for Cortland, two of them.
Yeah, we actually saw a ton of block kicks in general. We'll talk about that in a little bit over the weekend. But Cortland now, I think it's 6-3 overall, pretty solidly in second place there in the Empire 8, going into Cortica week against Ithaca. Probably a good candidate for the New York State Bowl or perhaps an ECAC if they decide to submit a bid. But crazy game there. Look, Utica dominated the statistics as far as total yards and I think time of possession, but there were just a few of these key plays that the Red Dragons made, and they pulled one out at the end.
One thing I want to point out to folks, though, Brockport versus St. Lawrence is coming up, as you saw from the schedule page that we showed. That's a crucial game for Brockport still, one they probably need to win. And the reason I say that is because essentially Brockport wants a home game. And the difference between a home game and an away game for a team like Brockport could be a win or a loss, or 10-0 versus 9-1 at the end of the day. They would be probably a number 2 national seed right now, the way things are lining up. That would be very good for them to have opportunities to win 2 games, maybe a third game. But a loss against St. Lawrence could hurt matters very much. So they have a big decision to make as to whether or not they can or should play Joe Germinario this week if he is physically capable of doing it. And we'll find that out probably by the end of the week. And hopefully Joe is watching this. He wanted us to give a shout out to his team. So a shout out to Brockport for making the playoffs. They did a great job in that game.
Empire 8 champs.
Alfred. Yep, absolutely. Empire 8 champs. We did get to see the celebration minus Joe on the field, obviously. But we know he was in spirit with them based on his Twitter activity following all of that. Liberty League. Well, we're not done yet, I guess, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Union put together, as we brought up to Coach Isernia, a 22-play drive, I think it was, for a field goal in that game.
Mm-hmm.
It really knocked Ithaca off their stride because it looked like Ithaca was the better offensive team of the two that day, but they just couldn't seem to get the rhythm back after that until later in the second half, finally, in a 6-3 game. Ithaca finally put away Union, and now roots for Union in the Dutchman Shoes game as RPI just smashed Rochester in the mouth early and often in that game. It's Union playing as Ithaca's proxy versus RPI in the Dutchman Shoes game for the playoffs.
It's kind of crazy in a way that all these sort of old-time New York rivals, they're against each other, but now they're suddenly for each other, and vice versa. But UK credit RPI, they're on a 4-game winning streak. Their team is really gelling well at the right time. Union, to me, just couldn't quite figure out the Bombers' defense. I mean, they obviously, like you said, they were able to convert third downs and they were moving down the field, but they just didn't have that same kind of explosive play that basically helped them beat Hobart. That wasn't able to show up on Saturday, and ultimately, I think the Bombers kind of were able to wear them down and put it away late. But still, not a bad season at all for Union. There's sitting, I think, at 7-2, and have a chance to finish the season with 8 wins. And hey, they haven't won the Shoes in 4 tries now, so it would be a great thing for Jeff Berman to bring those back to Schenectady.
And a sign of where things have gone this year, a game that was basically our marquee game for a couple of years is Hobart-St. Lawrence, and it kind of falls to the back pages of things here this season. Hobart beat St. Lawrence 34-7 in that game, and RPI, we were talking, it's 63-14 over Rochester. Wow. The MASCAC, we got some clarity this weekend, and surprisingly so. With 10 seconds left, as you can see from this clip, 10 seconds left, Framingham State throws for the winning touchdown that beats WestCon and gives Plymouth State, who had beaten Fitchburg State in a almost running time game. It was amazing how quick that game got over with. They win the MASCAC based on the assistance, and so here's the scores as well to look at. But you've got a situation where they're in the clubhouse at 9-1. Nothing much changes. What their regional ranking is this week is probably going to be the regional ranking ultimately, unless something above them changes where teams lose. What do you think of this Plymouth State team? It's been tough to gauge, and we watched a little bit of them on Saturday in the D3 Blitzer show. What do you come away with?
Well, first off, the guys from Fitchburg State on the announce table were great, like super entertaining. I mean, and the video broadcast quality is better than probably 90% of the private schools in Division III. So kudos to them. They did a great job in covering that game. What I saw on Saturday with the Panthers was a strong defensive team. They actually scored 2 touchdowns of their own, and I think a pick six and a scoop and score. So they're opportunistic. They're kind of an old-fashioned, running, grind attack on the ground. I think, the Panthers will probably end up being sent on the road to maybe somewhere near New York or Delaware, or perhaps, to Springfield or something to that effect. So it'll be interesting to see, depending on how things shake out with the rest of the East region. But pretty solid, football team. Not a lot of explosive offensive plays, but just kind of a ground and pound and a tough defense that should help them at least show well in the tournament.
I want to give a shout out to Worcester State, who has quietly become a force to be reckoned with this season a little bit. They are one of only 5 3-loss teams. There are 25 teams in the East region, minus the NESCAC, that are undefeated, 1 loss, 2 losses, or 3 losses right now. Worcester State's one of them, with only 3 losses this season, and they beat Bridgewater State 35-21. Maybe not the best strength of schedule, probably one of the worst ones of the 3 lost teams, but still, you win that many games and you don't get any mention throughout the season. You deserve a little bit better treatment than that, and so we want to give a shout out to Worcester State for
Go Lancers.
Go Lancers, absolutely right, for being that team. Hey, Western New England. A team we wanted to watch a little bit of on Saturday, but Curry stepped in the way of that. Thanks, guys. We appreciate that. But nonetheless, Salve Regina had lost to Western New England the previous week. It set up the situation with Curry between Western New England and them for basically a de facto championship game, although it was not over with if Curry won. But 42-28, Anthony Service and company take care of business in a big way, or at least a semi-big way. They put up a lot of points, that's for sure.
Well, I was just going to say we have to give some credit to Dante Aiken, who had 4 rushing touchdowns, 152 yards on the ground. Service, played another solid game, showing his experience. And, it was, I think it kind of played out like we thought it would, Frank. And it'll be interesting to see how the RAC handles Western New England and RPI for that matter, given the fact they kind of passed them over in the initial run because of the kind of confusion that it took. Now that we have another week under our belts, it looks like those 2 teams should pop up in the rankings. Western New England, basically the champion of the CCC, and RPI potentially the champion of the Liberty League.
And then we go over to the ECFC. We looked at that Husson game maybe twice total in the Blitzer show. It was like
28 to nothing. Yeah, it was like 10 minutes into the game, or not even 5 minutes into the game. John Smith and company just ran over Alfred State, no contest, 63 to nothing. The game actually that we missed, Frank, was the SUNY-Maritime needing to hang on to beat Dean, which talk about implications. I mean, SUNY's now at 8-1. And it seemed like the RAC was giving credit to these 1-loss teams, but I think the fact that they needed a field goal and sort of a second half shutout to stop an upside program may just keep SUNY off the list. I mean, I know they've declared for an ECAC game, and that's probably either that or the New England Bowls where they'll end up. They finish up the season with Gallaudet. Not saying that's a slam dunk, but even at either 9-1 or 8-2, they're probably going to do well in a bowl situation, at least from an eligibility perspective. But yeah, kind of a strange situation because SUNY-Maritime had been really throwing the ball and putting up a ton of points on the rest of the ECFC. But got to give the Bulldogs credit. I did a while ago.
It's amazing one to look at, actually, and I'll point out why. Yeah. Third down efficiency for Dean, 0 for 12. And 1 for 3 and 4th down. So they were 1 for 15 in 3rd and 4th downs. But the problem was Thomas Wright threw 4 interceptions. It's SUNY-Maritime's quarterback. And that was the equalizer in that game. Yardage difference, 310 to 181, and Dean was on the wrong side of that equation. So sometimes the numbers lie, but when you look at the interception number, that's the one that's going to jump out at you and tell you what the story of the game was. Every time Maritime had a chance, they threw the game away or threw the ball away again. Finally did end up holding on to win 17-14. NESCAC, I believe that's – did we cover all the New England conferences, or did I forget one?
Not just
NUMAC.
Can't forget our friends in the NUMAC, because it was a pretty offensive weekend for the triple option teams there. Springfield rolled up 558 yards in a 62-0 shutout of Maine Maritime. Springfield's now 9-0. They are 1 game away from basically clinching a playoff berth and the NUMAC title. They have to get past MIT, which is one of the games that we'll be previewing later in the week. Merchant Marine matched a school record, also kind of matched what Springfield did. They put up 62 points in a game against Catholic and had 707 total yards in that one. Pretty crazy.
Coming
Lots
soon
of
to
running.
ESPN3. That we'll be seeing more of that action against Coast Guard on Saturday. And unfortunately, I thought they were going to broadcast on 2 or 1 or U, but unfortunately, it's going to land on ESPN 3, which is the online platform. Still a nice
Hey,
gesture by ESPN.
yeah, I mean, Division III football teams can't be. It's like beggars can't be choosers. It's very rare that you see any D3 games on a national platform other than the Stag Bowl. I know that they've been doing a better job with getting the semifinals out there, but still, it's a handful of games a year. This game is, that we like to call the Army Navy game of Division III. Coast Guard did lose 44-16 against WPI, who's quietly a 7-2 team sitting there, kind of lurking in second place in the NUMAC. Great season for Coach Rob and those engineers from Worcester. But it's looking like who knows? Maybe the Mariners are the favorite. It is at New London, which is a beautiful site for that event. So we'll be covering more on the Secretary's Cup a little later this week.
NESCAC now we'll talk about, and well, Trinity could not pull it off. They cannot go undefeated this season, and they and Amherst are now tied with 1 loss in the NESCAC. 28-20, but it wasn't even that close. Amherst basically had a 3-touchdown lead, and Trinity tried to, at the last second, come back in that game. So now Amherst has to beat Williams, and Trinity has to beat Wesleyan to be the co-champions of the NESCAC. But obviously Amherst will walk away saying we beat them, and therefore we deserve to be thought of as a champion head-to-head if that happens. Not a slam dunk, though. Williams Amherst. Big game.
Well, yeah, and I was really surprised that Williams got blanked by Wesleyan. I thought Coach Ray and company would have either won that game or at least been more competitive. Not sure what happened there, but I think you kind of have to give Amherst a little bit of the early in the week favoritism, I guess, or at least as far as how that one will shake out. But we'll see what happens in the littlest big game in America coming up on Saturday.
Size doesn't matter. So let's go to our projected second East regional rankings, actually, James. And some folks have been asking us to do so again here, so we are not going to disappoint. And again, these are coming out on Wednesday, which is the 8th of November, at around 2:30, 3 p.m. if history serves, Eastern Time, Eastern Standard Time, because we finally lost daylight savings as of a couple of days ago. Hope we got your extra hours of sleep. So here we go. Not much has changed in the top teams. Let's look at them. Delaware Valley still above 500 in the strength of schedule, and that goes up from there when they play Widener. Brockport, 9-0. 550 strength of schedule is higher than it was last week because of that game against Alfred. That will go back down because they play St. Lawrence. Again, no games to really note on their schedule. We look at Springfield, and you can see that we've added a regionally ranked opponent win, which is Western New England. We'll explain that in a moment. We explained it last week, and we were wrong about that, but I have a feeling we might be right this go-around. But their strength of schedule has dropped to 500, and when they play MIT, we'll bounce back up, but to what degree, we're not sure. 9-0 on the season so far. Wesley, big win against Salisbury, and you wouldn't be surprised to see them remain where they were last week. Some might assume they could jump Springfield with that win. I don't think so. All things being equal, 9-0 versus 8-1. 9-0 gets it. It's not necessarily exactly equal what you're seeing in front of you here, but it's not so one-sided in Wesley's direction that you ignore the loss. And so I say that you keep them at number 4 for now. We'll see what happens following Week 11 action. Frostburg State was behind Wesley. Why would they jump them now? They didn't play them. They played Salisbury coming up. Frostburg State had a tough game against Kane, and as such, they don't go up, but I don't think they go down either. So there's 1 through 5, which was exactly 1 through 5 in the committee's, the RAC's Week 1 rankings. Anything that you see that causes you a little bit of agita on this list so far?
No, I think the only thing I would call out is just, there's only 12, I think, maybe 13 teams in all Division III that are undefeated at this point in the season. So I think, when push comes to shove with, Brockport and Springfield, they're going to, with Springfield or Wesley, so on, they're going to probably lean towards the unbeaten teams. That just is I know you can only play who's on your schedule, but I do think that still is viewed very positively. Maybe you could say that the committee could say, well, if George Germinario is hurt, like maybe they're not the number 2 team, maybe they should be 3. But I don't think that type of thinking factors in here, and I would be very surprised if this top 5 changed at all on Wednesday.
Sounds good. Although Case Western Reserve would like to speak with you about this whole undefeated teams getting the benefit of the doubt thing, because they did not get the same treatment in the first North rankings that we saw last week.
That's true.
Number 6, Husson. And I'm going to also show number 7, Plymouth State. These teams could very well be in the wrong order on our list right now. And that would surprise some Husson fans.
Yeah, we debated that.
Yeah, Husson won the game. They were number 6. Why wouldn't they stay number 6? Well, first off, the win versus Union has dropped off here as a regionally ranked opponent. And so now you look at a Husson, and it doesn't look quite as good. Their strength schedule, I think, dropped down to 496. Plymouth State's up to at 493. They're in the clubhouse at 9-1, and they have a regionally ranked win. If we are correct about Framingham State coming in, we'll see that in a moment. So this is very tough. This could easily be 6-7 flipped over, and it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Only for seeding purposes and bracketing purposes, it might. Yeah. But here's the other part of the story. I think Husson is going to Springfield no matter what. I just think that based on the distance issues and whatnot, and trying to keep some equity in the brackets, you can put Husson at very limited locations versus Plymouth State, which can go more locations at the end of the day, including to Union, or to RPI rather, or to I think Ithaca potentially, etc. Plymouth State actually can even get to Wesley. It's about 475 miles without a flight being involved. Yeah. So it's interesting to see how they do order these two teams, though. Husson seems to be beating opponents much more handily than Plymouth State is, and that'll be interesting to see. Number 8 and number 9 kind of have been that matched pair that go together for us, because you cannot have Western New England without RPI. RPI beat them head-to-head. The unranked losses may detract a little bit from the RPI resume, but the head-to-head win really, when you have two teams that are showing kind of equal scenarios here otherwise, number of losses and strength of schedule. Basically, I would say that Western New England is going to be behind RPI. It has to be behind, some people would say that Husson would have to be behind them also, and I don't think that's the way it's going to play out. If that's 2 losses versus 1 loss, I don't think you push Husson all the way down suddenly, down to 9th or something. No.
Yeah. And the only bad thing if you're RPI in this 8th position is that the likelihood, if you win the Liberty League, you're probably going to some place called Alliance, or maybe down to Del Val, depending on how they set it up. But they're in the field, which is great. And I know they've had success in the past at the ECAC Bowls, and they filed for one. So that's certainly a fallback if somehow they lose to Union and Ithaca ends up going. I think either way, the chances of a Liberty League Mount Union pairing seem to be pretty high. That's happened a few times over the years now, but we'll see how that pans out when it comes to actual big bracket projection.
The one interesting thing about Brockport at the end of the day is geography and how it plays out for them, because they are technically closer to a lot of the North teams than they are a lot of the East teams that are going to be in this field.
Yep. Yeah.
And so they could be utilized more as a number 2 seed in the North than a number 2 seed in the East ultimately.
Yep.
We'll see what they do with it. I'm curious.
Yeah, and I've been a broken record on this, so apologies. But if you want to just look back to 2012, it was the same deal when Hobart went undefeated, and they were paired up with St. Thomas out in what was really a Western bracket because they were in Central/Western New York. Brockport's another hour out from them, so I think the likelihood of seeing a similar pairing like that is probably fairly high. We'll see what happens.
Number 10, Framingham State. And we'll also show other teams that we had considered here. The Albright Salisbury linkage is still there. They are some of the best two-loss teams out there that weren't on this list. SUNY-Maritime at 8-1, I believe, was the only one-loss team that is not on this list. But you look at that strength of schedule, it's just not there. I mean, that is criteria to overlook that team right there because they're a full tenth of a point below Western New England and RPI, tenth of a point and then some. Framingham State has a better strength of schedule. They both have losses against regionally ranked opponents, and so at that point, give it to Framingham State, not to SUNY-Maritime. So that's where.
And since we mentioned Worcester State earlier, they actually have a game against Framingham State in the final week of the regular season. I've had some people through social media kind of ask me if Framingham goes 9-1, do they have a chance at a Pool C bid? I've been kind of like, the chances would be very, very low, just given there's only 5 of them, and starting off at number 10. The chances of the way the sort of there's a word for it. I forget. That as it circulates through. You start off, you have all the ones at the top. They look at all of them, and then they pick one, and then next one comes up and all that. But starting off at number 10 at this standpoint, too far down the list, they'll be on the outside looking in. So hopefully Framingham can win with finish with a 9-1 record, maybe get an ECAC or New England Bowl bid, and still not a bad season for the Rams.
Yeah, I mean, look, their strength of schedule goes up. They would have to hope that Frostburg loses to Salisbury, but then Salisbury could also creep back into play here as well with a win like that. And so Framingham State's kind of locked into a scenario that I wouldn't want to be locked into if I really had playoff hopes. I would say that you really have to hope, first off, that Springfield goes in Pool B. Just to make sure Frostburg has max exposure on top of them at that point. We'll see how it plays out. But that's what we've got here in terms of our projections. Again, on Wednesday, we'll come live once we see the list and show them to you and explain why we think the committee did what they did, and also talk about potential matchups that emanate from the list as well. But for now, we're just going to leave it at that. I think you want to give a shout out to a SUNY-Maritime player, perhaps, who reached out to us. And we will not be showing footage necessarily, but you know what? We do like the players reaching out to us from time to time to let us know that they're out there and that they're watching us as well. So go ahead.
We appreciate that. Well, it's funny when we were talking about that SUNY-Maritime Dean game and the fact that Thomas Wright was struggling so much. Well, really, the Privateers defense had to step up, and probably one of the guys who had to do that was a senior defensive back, number 49, Josh Burris, who's from Folsom, Louisiana. And so he reached out to us, so we're just giving him a shout out and congrats on the season to date. It seems like I know you got that senior day game coming up against Gallaudet, but I have a feeling there may be one more postseason game in store for the Privateers. They've had a real good year, and I think we'll see them come November 18th, give or take, depending on when these games fall. So nice. Thanks for reaching out, Josh, and we appreciate you following the show.
Our ratings in Alabama went through the roof last week, according to our Facebook activity, and so perhaps our Louisiana ratings will go through the roof this week by this mention and show.
We got north and south covered here, Frank. We're nationwide.
We're the East region. We're the East region. We got north and south covered. We got to work on our western reach, I guess, and appeal.
Yes.
So, James, we've been yapping for 34 minutes or so, according to my clock here. Any final thoughts?
Just sort of as a programming note, as Frank said, Wednesday around 3 o'clock, we'll have the reaction to the next round of the playoff rankings. We'll probably do a lightning round on Thursday or Friday for some of the final games. There were 5 tickets punched in the region. There's still 3 up for grabs. The Liberty League, MAC, and the New MAC titles are still up in the air. And then over the weekend, we're not going to do another blitzer. That was pretty awesome, but also very time-consuming. And since there are only 3 title games sort of left out there, we'll take it easy. We want to watch the Secretary's Cup like everybody else. But Sunday night, to be decided, but maybe around 5 or 6 o'clock, we will have the chair of the NCAA selection committee yet again to sort of
Well,
see
we'll
how.
release it after. We have to wait until after the brackets are released, so it won't release until about 7 o'clock on Sunday. But
Yep.
we're hoping to do it in time to release it almost within 15 minutes after the release of the bracket show or the end of the bracket
Yep.
show, which we understand is not live this year. It is video on demand, and so you will be able to fast forward through it, unlike most years. And that's a little disappointing. You used to have the whole CBS feel of releasing the brackets of the field of 64 thing back when for March Madness, and that's not quite the way it's going to work this year. So a little bit of a disappointment from the NCAA on that one, but we will still be doing what we can to promote the selections and how they all came about for the 10th straight year, as you said.
Yeah.
We will have the committee chair, so that's great news for us. We'll have a player interview as well at some point possibly this week, so stay tuned for that. And that's a lot of stuff. So we're going to go now and go live our lives for about 5 minutes or so. That's about what we're allowed each week. Thanks for joining us, folks.
Thanks.